Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room hummed with the sound of maps sliding, pens tapping, men shifting in their chairs. A projector beam cut through the cigarette haze, outlining red lines and numbered grids on the wall. Yet when she spoke, no one turned. Not one head lifted. It was as if her words fell into the cracks of the concrete floor, swallowed before they ever reached the air. She sat straighter. The folder in her hands trembled only slightly, though her jaw had locked tight. They didn't hear her suggestion about the ridge. They didn't hear the warning in her voice, the edge sharpened by nights of watching, listening, memorizing. No correction they heard, they just didn't care. "Ma'am," one of the captains interrupted her, his tone clipped, polite only because rank demanded it. "We'll stick to the plan." Her throat went dry. She caught the exchange of smirks around the table. They thought her wounds had made her fragile. They thought the limp in her walk meant the fire in her eyes had dimmed. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Outside, the wind rattled the rusted shutters of the compound. The war was close, too close. You could smell it in the dust, taste it in the metallic tang of the water, feel it in the way even silence carried weight. Somewhere beyond those walls, artillery echoed like distant thunder. She lowered her gaze, not to submit but to hide the storm brewing inside. Let them think she'd been silenced. Let them dismiss her like they always had. Soon they would know. The general entered without ceremony. Boots heavy, face unreadable, conversation stilled. Even the projector's hum seemed to shrink beneath his presence. He didn't glance at her, he rarely did, but she could feel the shift in the air. Respect wrapped around him like armor, earned through years of battles most of these men had only studied on paper. He cleared his throat, eyes scanning the room. Proceed. And so the mission was laid out in detail. Insertion before dawn, climb the ridge, secure the compound, neutralize resistance. Every step was drawn with precision, as if certainty could be willed into reality by the sharpness of lines on a map. But she knew what they didn't. She had walked that ridge alone. She had seen the movement in the dark, the shadows that weren't supposed to be there. And she had heard whispers in a language the others didn't understand, words that spoke of reinforcements, of traps set with patience. Her stomach tightened as the meeting dragged on. She wanted to speak, to demand they listen. But she also remembered the last time she had forced her voice into the room, the way laughter had echoed after, the way someone muttered, "Should have stayed home after that injury." Her hand brushed unconsciously against her thigh, tracing the scar beneath the fabric. A scar they thought had broken her. A scar that, to them, meant weakness. If only they knew what it had cost her to come back. When the briefing ended, chairs scraped against the floor, boots stomped, and orders spread like wildfire. She rose slowly, collecting her notes, her silence heavy with words unsaid. One of the younger sergeants brushed past her with a glance, quick, almost guilty. He had heard her before. He had believed, maybe. But belief was a dangerous thing in a room full of doubt. The general paused at the doorway. For a second, just a second, his gaze landed on her. Not a nod, not acknowledgement, just an unspoken weight, as if he had seen the fire flicker in her eyes and chosen not to extinguish it. Then he left. The others filed out. She was alone again. The walls seemed closer now. Her breathing echoed in her ears. She dropped her folder on the table and leaned both hands against the wood. The scars on her knuckles pressed white. Why was it always like this? She had given years, blood, pieces of herself that would never heal. She had carried comrades off the battlefield, stood guard in the rain, lain still in the dirt for hours with her rifle pressed to her cheek, waiting for the one breath that could change everything. And still, they looked through her as if she were a shadow. But shadows had power. Shadows could see what light could not. She would prove it, not with words, not with arguments, but with silence that screamed louder than all their voices combined. That night she lay on her cot staring at the ceiling fan slicing the air into restless fragments. Sleep didn't come. Memories did. A village burned, screams tangled with gunfire, a child's eyes staring at her from the smoke, too wide, too terrified. The moment her leg gave out beneath her, pain swallowing her whole. The sound of laughter, enemy laughter, before the world tilted and went black. She pressed her palms over her face. The smell of burning still clung to her skin. Years later, she couldn't wash it away. But neither could she forget the promise she made in that moment of darkness, that if she rose again, she would not waste the breath she'd been given. So she rose. Before dawn, the unit gathered near the vehicles. Engines idled, headlights sliced through the fog. She adjusted her gear quietly, methodically. No wasted motion. Her rifle slung across her back, the weight familiar, almost comforting. "Try not to slow us down," one of the Marines muttered as he passed. The others chuckled, low but sharp. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just tightened the strap across her chest and kept walking. The ridge loomed ahead as the convoy rolled forward. Shadows stretched across the earth, long and jagged. Every bump in the road rattled her bones, but her eyes stayed fixed, scanning, memorizing. She knew what they would find. She had seen it before. The trap. The silence too heavy, like the world holding its breath. And when it came, she would be ready. The first shots cracked the dawn. Not theirs. Hers. Why was her finger the first to tighten on the trigger? The convoy had slowed, tires crunching gravel as the ridge came into view. Marines shifted in their seats, weapons angled, breaths shallow in the cold morning. The fog hadn't lifted yet. It clung to the earth like a living thing, curling around boots, softening edges. But in the mist she had seen it, just a flicker. The glint of glass where none should be. A barrel catching dawn before the sun could swallow it whole. Her rifle slid from her shoulder with the grace of muscle memory. Knees hit dirt, breath stilled. And then crack. The echo ripped through the valley. A sharp cry answered from the ridge. A body slumped into view, tumbling from the rocks where it had hidden. The Marines froze. For a heartbeat, silence pressed down heavier than gunfire. Then chaos. "Contact, contact!" Voices erupted, boots scrambling for cover, rifles raised. The air shattered with bursts of fire, muzzle flashes cutting through the mist. She stayed prone, cheek welded to the stock, eyes calm in the storm. Another glint, another target. She squeezed, and the ridge spat sparks as another figure crumpled. And still no one thanked her. No one said a word. Instead, the mutters carried between the bursts of fire. "Lucky shot. Probably got in the way. Should have stayed in the truck." Each word landed sharper than the rounds whistling overhead. But she didn't let go. Couldn't. If she let their voices in now, she would lose the rhythm that had taken years to build. She found another silhouette, barely a shadow in the rocks. The recoil kissed her shoulder, the body stilled. 3. And yet inside she wasn't counting kills. She was counting heartbeats, her own. Each one proof she was still here, still capable, still necessary. By the time the ridge quieted, the Marines had stormed forward, sweeping the rocks, clearing pockets of resistance. Boots thundered past her, shouting, adrenaline. She rose slowly, dust clinging to her uniform, rifle heavy in her hands. "Clear," someone barked from above. The convoy crept forward again. The mission continued. And still, not a single acknowledgement came her way. She trudged after them, her leg aching beneath the weight of gear and memory. Every step was a reminder of what they saw when they looked at her. Not the three bodies cooling on the ridge, but the slight hitch in her stride. The wound that had tried to steal her career. The sun was higher now, burning the mist away. Heat pressed down, sweat gathering beneath her collar. The earth stretched endless hills, dust, the skeleton of abandoned buildings scattered like broken teeth. She scanned everything, eyes restless. Danger never announced itself twice. At the compound perimeter they fanned out. Stone walls, cracked and faded, rose like jagged teeth. Windows gaped dark and empty. The air was too still, too quiet. Her chest tightened. She felt it again, that wrongness, the same one she had tried to warn them about in the briefing. She crouched near the wall, fingers grazing the dirt. Tracks, fresh, too fresh. But before she could speak, the order came sharp and final. Move in. Boots surged forward, rifles up. She bit her tongue. The words clawed at her throat, but what good would they do now? They had chosen not to listen. To them, she was already a ghost in uniform. So she followed. Inside, the compound smelled of rot and ash, walls pockmarked by old battles. The air tasted stale, as if it hadn't been breathed in months. But she knew better. Shadows shifted where no wind moved. The silence was too deliberate, too heavy. Her rifle rose instinctively. A bead of sweat slid down her spine. And then it happened. The blast ripped through the hall. Shrapnel sang through the air, concrete buckled, bodies thrown like rag dolls. The world went white, then red, then soundless. Her ears rang, blood hot against her skin. She staggered, vision blurred, breath shallow. Figures crawled in the smoke, Marines gasping, crying out, clutching wounds. Some didn't move at all. She forced herself up, teeth grinding against pain. The trap, she had seen it coming, she had tried. And still they hadn't listened. Her throat burned with words unsaid, with rage unshed. She swallowed them down. No time. The enemy was moving in shadows, darting through the haze, voices barking orders in a tongue she recognized too well. She dragged one of the younger Marines, blood pooling from his leg, into cover. His eyes were wide, glassy with terror. I don't want to die," he whispered, voice breaking. She pressed his wound hard, forcing him to focus on her face. "You won't, not today." Her rifle barked again, precise, unrelenting. Each shot a message, not just to the enemy but to those who doubted her. She wasn't here to prove herself anymore. She was here to survive, to make sure others survived. But inside, her heart cracked under the weight of fury. How many lives could have been spared if they had just listened? If they had trusted the woman they mocked for scars they couldn't understand? Minutes bled into hours. The compound became a graveyard of echoes, gunfire, screams, silence. By dusk, reinforcements finally arrived. The surviving Marines slumped against walls, faces pale, uniforms torn. The general stood among them, surveying the wreckage. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable. For a moment his gaze lingered on her, dust smeared across her face, blood staining her hands, chest heaving. She looked back at him, silent. No salute, no words, just silence thick with everything she wanted to scream. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence was his answer. Later, when the bodies were lined up, when the sun bled into the horizon, she sat alone on the broken steps of the compound. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stared at the dirt, at the blood drying into cracks on her skin. She thought of the young Marine's words, "I don't want to die." She thought of the ones who hadn't made it out. And she thought of the briefing, of her voice swallowed by indifference, of the laughter that had seemed so harmless then. Her chest ached, not just from the fight, from the weight of being right when it mattered most. She tilted her head back, staring at the darkening sky. Stars blinked awake one by one, uncaring, eternal. And in that moment, a thought whispered through her like a confession. Maybe silence wasn't strength. Maybe silence was just another wound. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire? She sat on the broken steps until her body felt carved from stone. Around her, the compound was a ruin of smoke and memory. The medics moved quietly among the wounded, their gloves red, their faces blank with exhaustion. Somewhere, a Marine sobbed into his helmet, shoulders shaking. Somewhere else, another cursed under his breath, every syllable bitter. But no one came to her, no one looked her way. The general stood at the far end of the courtyard, speaking low with his officers. His hands moved as he gestured to the map spread across the hood of a vehicle, his voice calm, controlled. He didn't even glance at her. She told herself she didn't care, that she didn't need his acknowledgement or theirs, That survival was its own validation, but the truth gnawed like an old wound. She had saved lives today. She had bled for them. And still her presence was a shadow on the wall, a silence no one wanted to break. Her leg throbbed as she rose, her rifle heavy across her chest. She walked toward the vehicle, toward the map, the weight of dust and blood trailing behind her. The men stiffened as she approached, conversations faltering for the briefest moment. Then, pretending she wasn't there, they continued. She studied the map over their shoulders. The lines were neat, too neat, as if order could be drawn from chaos with a pen stroke. Her lips parted, the words ready to spill. "You're walking into another trap." But she stopped. The general's eyes lifted, finally. For the first time all day, his gaze met hers fully. His expression didn't shift, didn't soften. But in that stare there was something. Not dismissal, not acknowledgement, something harder to name. And then, just like that, his attention dropped back to the map. The silence roared louder than any battlefield. She turned away before the bitterness could swallow her whole. The sky above had bled to indigo, the first stars flickering through the haze. Somewhere beyond those stars, her family might be looking at the same sky. She wondered if they thought of her, if they knew she still breathed, still fought, still carried the ghosts of all she couldn't save. Her hand drifted to her pocket. She felt the edge of the photograph she kept there, worn from years of folding. She didn't pull it out. Not now. Not here. The image was too fragile for this world of ash and blood. Instead, she walked the perimeter, rifle low, eyes sharp. The night pressed close, every shadow suspect. She felt it again, that tension in the air, the quiet that was never just quiet. A voice broke the stillness. "You shouldn't be here alone." She turned. The young Marine she had dragged to safety stood a few paces away, his leg bound tight with fresh bandages, his face pale. He leaned against the wall, trying to look steady. "I've been alone longer than you've been alive," she said softly. He cracked a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You saved me back there." She looked away. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone. They were running for cover. You came for me." The words dug into her chest, sharp and unexpected. Gratitude, simple, honest. She didn't know how to carry it. "Rest," she muttered, her voice rougher than she intended. "You'll need it." He nodded, though his eyes lingered on her, searching, as if he wanted to say more. But he didn't. And when he limped back toward the others, she stayed in the shadows, the weight of his words heavier than her rifle. That night she couldn't sleep. The cot beneath her felt foreign, the walls of the makeshift barracks too thin, too close. Her dreams came jagged, flashes of fire, screams, a child's wide eyes staring at her through smoke. She woke with her pulse hammering, chest tight, the memory raw. She rose quietly, boots soft on the cracked floor, and stepped outside. The air was cooler, the stars clearer. The compound slept, but the world didn't. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Somewhere else a single shot cracked the night, then silence. Her hand brushed the scar on her thigh, the wound they thought defined her, the reason they dismissed her. But it wasn't the scar that haunted her. It was the night she earned it. She had been pinned down in a village raid, cut off, her unit scattered. Smoke had swallowed the streets, fire painting shadows on the walls. She remembered running, the sound of children crying, the weight of her rifle pulling against her shoulder. And then pain, blinding, white-hot, stealing her breath. She had fallen hard, her leg useless, her weapon skittering from her grasp. Enemy footsteps had drawn closer, laughter sharp, cruel. She had dragged herself into an alley, teeth sinking into her lip to silence her own scream. She thought she would die there. She thought she would never see another sunrise. But she didn't. And the promise she made in that alley, "If I survive, I will not waste the life I've been given," still bound her every breath. Now, standing in the night outside the ruined compound, she felt that promise burn again. Footsteps crunched behind her, heavy, measured. She didn't turn until the voice spoke. You saw it coming. The general, his tone was flat, not quite accusation, not quite concession. Her jaw tightened. She kept her eyes on the horizon. I tried to warn you. Silence stretched, long, heavy, then next time you will. It wasn't an apology, not acknowledgement, just an order dressed as permission. She turned her head slightly enough to see his profile in the dim light. His face was carved from stone, unreadable. But his eyes carried something she hadn't seen before, a shadow of doubt. For the first time, he looked human. And then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the night, leaving her alone again with her thoughts. But something inside her shifted. Maybe silence wasn't strength. Maybe silence was survival. And maybe, just maybe, survival was no longer enough. She breathed deep, the air cold in her lungs. Tomorrow the mission would continue. Tomorrow they would march back into fire. Tomorrow she would have to decide. Would she keep her silence or finally let her voice cut through the roar? The stars above blinked like distant eyes, watching, waiting. And she wondered, when the time came, would anyone truly listen? Why did the morning feel heavier than the night? The sun rose slow and reluctant, dragging shadows long across the broken compound. Dusk clung to the air, refusing to settle. The survivors moved like ghosts, quiet, deliberate, avoiding each other's eyes. Bandages stained red. Helmets hung low. The silence between them said more than any briefing ever could. She adjusted her gear in that silence, each strap pulled tight, each buckle fastened with care. Her leg ached, stiff from the night, but she welcomed the pain. Pain meant she was still alive. The general's orders came crisp at dawn. They would move deeper into the hills. Intelligence suggested a network of caves. The ambush at the compound was only a warning. Something larger brewed in the mountains. The Marines listened without question, not because they believed, because orders left no room for belief. She said nothing. Her throat burned with the memory of yesterday's unheeded warnings. She could scream and still be unheard, so she saved her voice. The young Marine, the one she had dragged from the blast, limped beside her as they moved out. His name was Cole. She hadn't asked, he had offered. She almost didn't want to know. Names made loss heavier, but he insisted. Figured you should know who you saved, he said with a half-smile, teeth pale against the grime. She didn't answer, but the name lodged in her mind anyway, Cole. The march into the hills was grueling. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth, sucking moisture from their throats. Boots scuffed against gravel, packs bit into shoulders. The silence of yesterday lingered, unbroken except for the occasional cough or muttered curse. She scanned the ridges, eyes restless. Every shadow could hide a rifle. Every rock could mask movement. The world here was never still, it only pretended. Her thoughts drifted despite herself, to her first days in uniform, to the way the academy walls had smelled of polish and promise, to the way instructors had eyed her, not unkind but skeptical, a woman among men, a soldier who wasn't supposed to exist. You'll have to work twice as hard, one had warned her quietly after drills. She had nodded, breathless, sweat running into her eyes. Twice as hard wasn't enough. She had learned that quickly. She had learned that excellence still came wrapped in doubt when it wore her face. The memory stung as fresh as the sunburn rising on her skin. By midday, the hills closed in. The path narrowed, cliffs on one side, a sheer drop on the other. The heat pressed down like a hand on the back of her neck. Sweat stung her eyes. Her rifle felt heavier with every step. And then movement. She froze, hand raised. The column halted behind her, mutters rising. "What is it now?" one of the captains hissed, impatience sharp. She didn't answer, her finger pressed to her lips. There it was again, a sound too faint for most ears, a scrape of stone against stone, a whisper where no wind blew. Her chest tightened. "In the rocks," she murmured. The captain rolled his eyes. "We've wasted enough time." The shot cracked before he finished. The bullet caught the Marine behind him, dropping him to the dirt with a cry. Chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the cliffs, gunfire ricocheted off stone, voices barked orders swallowed by the roar. She was already on her stomach, rifle pressed to her cheek, calm in the storm, breath steady. One silhouette, down, another, down. But there were too many. They had been waiting, patient as wolves. The unit scrambled for cover, some pinned, some firing blind. Cole ducked low beside her, his rifle trembling in his hands. His eyes darted to her, wide, desperate. "What do we do?" Her pulse hammered, but her voice stayed even. "We hold. We don't give them the ridge." He swallowed, nodded, pressed his cheek to the dirt. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it only felt that way. Time warped in battle, moments expanding, collapsing, leaving nothing but the echo of gunfire and the sting of grit in her teeth. At last the enemy fire thinned. The hills grew quiet again, too quiet, bodies cooled in the sun. Flies began their endless hum. The unit regrouped, faces drawn, eyes hollow. They had lost 3, more wounded, supplies dwindled, and the caves were still ahead. She sat against a rock, wiping sweat from her brow, her hands trembling despite her will. Cole sank beside her, chest heaving, blood seeping from a graze on his arm. "You were right," he whispered. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. The words were heavier than any bullet. Later, as night fell, they camped in the shadow of the hills. The fire was small, the circle tighter, voices low. The general moved among them, speaking little, his presence a weight more than a comfort. She sat apart, cleaning her rifle with slow, steady motions. The ritual calmed her, each stroke of the cloth against steel, a reminder that control still existed in small places. Cole approached, limping, a tin cup of water in his hand. He offered it without a word. She hesitated, then took it, sipping slow. The water was warm, metallic, but it eased her throat. "You don't sleep much, do you?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Me neither, not since," he trailed off, eyes distant. "I had a buddy back home. We enlisted together, said we'd always have each other's backs. First firefight, he didn't make it." His voice cracked, he swallowed hard. "Sometimes I hear him in the quiet like he's still there. You ever?" She didn't answer, just stared at the fire until her vision blurred. Cole sighed, rubbing at his eyes. "Sorry, I know you don't talk much." She set the rifle down, her hands folding in her lap. For a long moment she was silent. Then softly, "I had a sister." Cole's eyes lifted. "She used to braid my hair before I shipped out, said it made me look fierce." Her throat tightened. "She died while I was overseas. Car accident. I wasn't there, couldn't even bury her." The words burned, raw and unspoken for years. She had buried them beneath missions, beneath silence, beneath scars. But now, under the indifferent stars, they slipped free. Cole said nothing, just nodded, his gaze steady, carrying her pain without judgment. For the first time in years, she felt a little less alone. The fire crackled, the night stretched long, and in the distance the hills whispered secrets the wind refused to carry. Tomorrow they would march again. Tomorrow the caves would swallow them. Tomorrow silence would once more be her weapon and her curse. But tonight, for one fragile heartbeat, she allowed herself the smallest mercy, the company of someone who finally listened. Why was her hand trembling when the rifle itself didn't weigh that much anymore? She'd carried heavier loads on worse days, packs stuffed with gear that bent her spine until her body grew numb. But this was different. This wasn't the weight of steel. This was the weight of choice, the kind that left a mark long after the mission ended. She adjusted her cheek against the cold metal, steadying her breathing. The desert wind was low tonight, whispering across the ruined village below. Through her scope, she watched the cluster of men moving with calculated patterns. She knew what they carried, knew what it would mean if they slipped through. Yet her eyes caught on something else. A boy no older than 14 was trailing them, carrying an old lantern, its faint light flickering against the wall. She blinked hard, trying to shake the image. Her chest burned. The briefing had been clear: stop the convoy no matter the collateral, but something inside her fought back. Orders were simple, execution was not. A whisper buzzed in her earpiece. Target is in sight, confirmed shot. She didn't reply immediately. Her throat tightened. The voice came again, sharper now. You have eyes, Marine, do it. She swallowed, eyes narrowing. The boy paused, setting the lantern down to tie his worn sandal. The convoy kept moving, unaware. She exhaled slowly. A memory flashed. Another boy, years ago, different country, same tired eyes. She had been 19 then, new to the field, reckless. She had pulled the trigger that night without hesitation. The sound of his body hitting the dirt never left her. Her finger hovered. A bead of sweat slid down her temple, stinging her eye. She inhaled a sharp, cold breath. Then silence. She shifted the barrel a hair, angling away from the child, squeezed. The first round cracked the night open. One of the armed men collapsed, clutching his chest. Shouts filled the air, panic scattering the group. She fired again, this time at the lead truck's tire, sending sparks and dust into the chaos. Engines roared, men shouted, the lantern fell, its faint light extinguished in the dirt. Targets neutralized, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Static crackled. You hesitated, what the hell happened out there? She pulled back from the scope, her eyes burning. Mission complete, she said. Her tone left no space for argument. She lowered the rifle, the night pressing down heavier than her gear. Hours later, back at the forward post, the looks began. Quiet at first, then sharper, whispers over rations. She heard them when she walked past the mess tent. She froze. Almost cost us. Not fit for this. She didn't answer. Not yet. Let them talk. But each word slid under her skin, scraping against wounds still healing. That night, as she lay on the cot, she pressed her fingers against the old scar running across her ribcage. The wound that had almost ended her career months ago. The one that made her a target for their jokes. They never saw the nights she woke in cold sweats, fighting the memory of blood pooling beneath her. They never knew the shame of being carried off the field when she had sworn never to be a burden. Her eyes closed. Sleep came in fragments, jagged and broken. Dawn rose with a pale light that did nothing to warm the air. She sat with her boots unlaced, staring at the ground when the order came in. New mission, high risk. She was on it. No choice, no debate. When she entered the briefing room, the air shifted. A dozen eyes flicked toward her, some with quiet judgment, others with indifference. She stood anyway, shoulders square, chin lifted. The map on the table displayed routes cut through hostile terrain. At the far end, the general himself watched in silence. His gaze lingered on her. Not with anger, not with pity, something else, something quieter. She wondered if he knew, if he had heard the whispers. The plan was brutal. Infiltrate under night cover, hold position until evac. Too many variables, too few guarantees. She studied the map, tracing lines with her eyes, memorizing paths like scars. And then, something she hadn't expected. The general spoke. You'll take point. The room froze. Her heart thudded once, hard against her chest. She felt the weight of every glance cutting into her skin. 1,000 unspoken protests hummed in the air, but none dared voice them, not against him. She nodded slowly, refusing to let the flicker of surprise show. Understood. Later, alone, she wondered why. Why trust her? Why now? The answer didn't come easily. Maybe he had seen the reports. Maybe he had read between the lines. Or maybe he simply saw what the others refused to see, that her scars were not weakness. They were proof she had been there and returned. Proof she had learned what hesitation cost. The night of the mission, the desert seemed endless. Each step sank into dust, every sound muffled into silence. Her team followed close, weapons ready, breaths controlled. The air smelled of sand and rust, sharp in her nose. At the ridge, she raised a fist, halting them. Ahead, shadows moved in the broken light of burning oil drums. She crouched, pressing her cheek to the scope again. The faces were blurred by heat shimmer, but their intent was clear. Her chest tightened, not from fear this time, from clarity. This was the choice she had made when she first signed her name. This was why she endured the mocking, the wounds, the long nights of silence. For this moment, when there was no one else, when the weight fell squarely on her shoulders. The radio hissed faintly, "Your call." Her breath slowed. The world narrowed. Every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat folded into a single thread of focus. And this time, there was no hesitation. What did silence mean in a place like this? Out here, silence wasn't peace. It was pressure. It pressed against her ears, coiled tight around her chest. It was never empty. It carried echoes of things unseen, the weight of what could happen at any second. She crouched low against the ridge, rifle steady, her eyes scanning the flickering orange haze ahead. The oil drums crackled as fire licked their rims, sending black smoke twisting into the night sky. Every shadow seemed alive. Every figure could be friend or fatal. Her team waited on her signal. 4 Marines, all seasoned, all wary. She could feel their doubt without seeing their eyes. It clung to her like the dust coating her skin. The mission brief replayed in her head. Secure the supply cache, prevent the enemy from moving it across the border. Simple on paper, impossible in execution. "Your call," the voice crackled again through her comms, quieter this time. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she let the silence stretch, counting heartbeats. She remembered what hesitation had cost her before. Not tonight. Tonight, hesitation had no place. Her hand rose, 2 fingers slicing through the air. Advance. The team shifted, shadows weaving forward, boots barely touching the earth. She led, each step calculated, weight balanced, rifle angled with intent. Her lungs burned with every breath of acrid smoke, but she kept her rhythm steady, measured, unyielding. As they neared the perimeter, the first sound shattered the silence, a metallic clatter, faint but sharp. She froze, fist up. Her heart spiked. Ahead, 2 figures emerged, rifles slung, voices low. Their words carried in the night, foreign, urgent. Her Marine beside her leaned in. "Take M now." His whisper was edged with impatience, his finger already twitching on the trigger. She shook her head, eyes locked through the scope. "Wait." The men paused, one adjusting his weapon strap. The lantern light caught his face. He looked no older than 20, exhaustion heavy in his eyes. He wasn't looking for a fight tonight. He was surviving it. She exhaled, slow, shifted her sightline. Past him, further down, she saw it, the cache. Crates stacked against a ruined wall, tarps half-draped, vehicles idling nearby. That was the target. The guards were just fragments of the larger picture. Her decision came sharp, like the snap of a wire. She signaled right flank. The Marines fanned out, circling the cache with practiced precision. She moved forward, pressing low against a shattered wall, feeling grit scrape her palms. Then it happened, a shout, a rifle lifted. The world cracked open with gunfire. She didn't think, she reacted. Her shot dropped the first threat before the echo faded. Dust exploded around her as rounds tore into the stone. She pressed in, firing, moving, her team answering back. Shouts turned into chaos, footsteps scattering, engines roaring. One Marine screamed, "Hit." She pivoted, dragging him behind cover, her shoulders straining under his weight. His blood smeared her glove, hot and slick. "Stay with me," she hissed, pressing hard against his wound. His eyes were wide, teeth clenched, body trembling. "Don't you quit on me." Gunfire roared. She lifted, returned fire, precise, relentless. One by one, threats fell until the night swallowed the last echo. Smoke and silence returned, thicker now, heavier. Her chest heaved. Her hands shook, not from fear but from the adrenaline clawing through her veins. She looked down. The Marine's breathing was shallow but steady, alive for now. The team regrouped. 3 standing, 1 wounded, all eyes on her. No one spoke. They didn't need to. She had made the call. She had carried it through. But inside her something twisted. Not pride, not relief, something darker. The faces of those she had spared earlier flickered in her mind. The boy with the lantern. The young guard too tired to fight. She wondered if they were among the fallen now. She wondered if her mercy had been wasted. They secured the cache, planting charges, prepping for detonation. The general's voice came through comms, firm, direct. Status. She pressed her mic. Cache secured, casualty stable, preparing to exfil. A pause, then understood. His voice carried no judgment, no praise, just the cold steadiness of command. But she wondered, did he know what it cost? Did he understand the choices made in the shadows of orders? They moved out before dawn, carrying the wounded between them. The desert stretched endless, the horizon bleeding pale light. Every step was heavier than the last. She felt the weight in her bones, in the scars along her side, in the silence that grew between them. When they reached the outpost, medics rushed in. The wounded Marine was pulled from her grip, swallowed into the blur of hands and voices. She stood aside, dirt and blood crusted on her skin, rifle still slung tight across her chest. And then eyes all around, watching, weighing the whispers again. She caught fragments. She led. "He's alive." She pulled it off. She didn't answer. She walked past them, boots heavy, gaze fixed forward. She felt their stares like fire on her back. Later, in the dim quiet of the debrief room, the general faced her. The map lay folded between them, the air thick with unsaid things. "You disobeyed direct tempo on engagement," he said finally. His voice was even, unreadable. She held his gaze. "I completed the mission. My team is alive." He studied her, long, silent. Then he leaned back, fingers steepled. "Do you know why I put you in point?" She didn't answer, not immediately. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Because wounds don't lie," he said. "Scars tell me what reports cannot. You've been broken and you came back. That tells me more than hesitation ever will." The words landed heavy. She didn't know if it was praise or a warning, maybe both. Her throat tightened, and if the others don't see it that way. His eyes narrowed, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting at the corner. "They will, eventually, or they won't, doesn't matter. Your job is not to be seen, it's to endure." Silence stretched between them, sharp and fragile. Then he stood, folding the map with deliberate calm. "Rest, you'll need it, this isn't over." She watched him leave, the echo of his boots fatting. Alone now, she pressed her hand against her side, feeling the scar beneath. His words replayed in her mind, looping, digging deeper. "Endure." That night sleep didn't come. She sat outside the barracks, the desert sky vast above her, stars like wounds scattered across the dark. She thought of the boy with the lantern. She thought of the Marine she saved. She thought of the silence after gunfire. Her chest ached, not from injury, from the weight of carrying choices no one else wanted to see. And yet beneath it all there was something else, a quiet pulse, not hope exactly, not yet, but something close. A whisper of strength. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that waits. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? She thought scars were enough, that once the wound closed, the memory would dull, fade into the background like a half-forgotten song. But out here, every silence carried echoes. Every shadow dragged pieces of the past into the present. The desert night was colder than usual. She felt it biting against her skin as she adjusted her rifle strap. Her team was asleep in the barracks, but she couldn't. Rest had become an enemy. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw faces. The boy with the lantern, the Marine bleeding under her hands. And before that, the boy she had killed when she was 19, the one whose eyes still haunted her when the dark pressed too close. She sat against the wall, boots planted in the dirt, head tilted back toward the stars. They reminded her of her brother, younger by 3 years, bright-eyed, reckless. He used to drag her out onto the roof of their small-town house, pointing at constellations, weaving stories she barely understood. He had wanted to enlist too, to follow her path. He never made it, a car accident. She had been deployed when it happened. She missed the funeral. The guilt carved a deeper scar than any bullet. She rubbed her hand over her face, exhaling into the cold. Her calm buzzed suddenly, jolting her upright. A voice came low, urgent. Prep, we're moving in 30. Her stomach tightened. No details, no time. That meant one thing, critical op. She rose, checked her gear, her motions mechanical, muscle memory overriding exhaustion. 30 minutes later, the team gathered in the operations tent. The general stood at the head, eyes hard, posture like stone. He didn't waste words. "There's chatter," he began, voice clipped. "High-value target, coordinates confirmed." He stabbed a finger at the map. "He's moving tonight, we intercept." The air shifted. Everyone knew what that meant. Not just a raid, not just supplies. This was personal, the kind of mission that could turn tides. Her eyes tracked the route. Dangerous terrain, minimal cover, too many choke points. She felt the weight of it pressing down. "Questions?" the general asked. Silence, none dared speak. His gaze landed on her. "You'll take Overwatch." Her heart lurched. Overwatch meant trust. It meant bearing the burden of first contact, of the opening shot that decided everything. She gave a single nod. Understood. Night swallowed them whole as they moved out. Engines off, boots crunching in rhythm, breaths sharp in the freezing air. She climbed the ridge, each step heavier than the last, until she found her perch overlooking the route. She settled in, rifle steady, scope scanning the dark ribbon of road below. Minutes bled into an hour. Nothing, just wind and silence. Her muscles cramped, her eyelids heavy, but she didn't move. Then a flicker, headlights in the distance. She stiffened, heart thudding. Through the scope she caught the convoy, 3 vehicles, armed escorts, and there, in the second truck, her target. But then something else. Her blood ran cold. A woman sat beside him, wrapped in a scarf, face half hidden. She was holding a child. Her breath caught. No one had mentioned family. No one had said anything about civilians. Her comm hissed, "Target confirmed, do it." Her finger hovered. The order was clear. The shot could end this now, cripple the enemy's chain. But her stomach twisted. The child's head rested against the woman's chest, tiny hands clutching fabric. "Do it," the voice pressed, harsher this time. Her scope trembled. Sweat burned her eyes. She blinked, focusing, forcing the world smaller, narrower, just one shot, one squeeze. But her brother's face came to her. Not as she remembered him alive, but the way she imagined he had looked in those final moments. Young, fragile, caught in something he couldn't fight. Her hands shook. "There's a civilian," she whispered into the mic. Static, then the general's voice cut through, deep and steady. "Identify." "Woman, child, in vehicle with target." A pause, long, crushing, then, "Hold fire." Relief surged through her chest so fast she nearly collapsed. She drew in a shuddering breath, pressing her cheek hard to the cold metal. The convoy slowed. The target climbed out, speaking with his men. She shifted her aim, tracking him. Orders shifted in her ear. "Take him clean." This time her body didn't hesitate. Her fingers squeezed. The crack split the night. The man dropped instantly, the convoy erupting in chaos. Shouts, gunfire, engines roaring. Her team advanced, striking fast, precise. She provided cover, every shot a shield. The woman screamed, clutching the child close, scrambling out of the vehicle. Bullets carved the air around her, but the team steered the fight away, securing the objective without drawing her in. When it was over, the night lay heavy with smoke and silence again. The child's cries carried faintly in the distance, raw and piercing. She lowered her rifle, chest heaving, throat tight. Back at the outpost, the whispers returned, sharper now. She called it in. Could have blown the op. Too soft. She ignored them. She told herself she didn't care. But in the quiet alone, she wondered if they were right. Later, the general summoned her. His face was unreadable, lines carved deep by years of command. "You saw what others missed," he said finally. "That's why you're still here." Her voice broke before she could stop it. "I nearly froze." He shook his head. "No, you saw and you chose." He leaned in, eyes piercing. "Don't confuse mercy with weakness. The line between them is thin, yes, but it's the only line worth holding." The words cut through her like a blade, sharp, painful, but clean. She carried them with her as she walked out, the desert wind slamming against her face. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her chest. Not absolution, not pride, but a fragile kind of purpose. The kind born from scars. The kind that endures. Blurred together, after-action reports, routine patrols, restless nights. The whispers didn't stop, but she didn't answer them. She carried her silence like armor. Until the morning, everything shifted. The wounded Marine she had dragged out weeks before, still pale, still healing, sought her out. He stood awkwardly by the barracks, crutches under his arms, gaze flicking to the ground. When she looked at him, he didn't speak at first. Then, softly, he said, "I'd be dead if not for you." Her chest clenched. He didn't wait for a reply. He just limped away, his words hanging in the air, heavier than any accusation. That night, for the first time in months, she slept without waking in a cold sweat. But war doesn't end with one mission. Another came, then another. Each one demanded more than it gave. Each one tested the thin line between strength and breaking. And slowly the tide shifted. The whispers didn't vanish, but they dulled. A nod here, a silent glance there. Respect not spoken but shown. Fragile, hesitant, but real. One evening, after a brutal day's march, one of the younger Marines asked her quietly, "Does it ever get easier?" She thought for a long time. The fire crackled between them, shadows flickering across tired faces. Then she said, "No, but you get stronger, or maybe you just learn to carry it differently." The boy nodded, his eyes heavy but grateful. And in that moment she realized something. She had become what she once needed, the one voice of honesty in the silence. Weeks later, as the unit prepared to rotate out, the general called her in one final time. His office was bare, just a table, a lamp, and a map rolled tight. "You've carried more than most," he said. "And you haven't broken. Remember that when you go home, because silence will follow you there too. Different kind, but heavier." Her voice was quiet. "What if I can't carry it?" He studied her, long and unflinching. "Then, you already are." The flight home was quiet. She sat by the window, staring out at the clouds rolling beneath the plane. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to explain herself to anyone. Not to the whispers, not to the doubts, not even to her own scars. She thought of her brother, of the boy with the lantern, of the Marine who had thanked her, of the child in the convoy who lived because she had seen. And for the first time, the silence inside her wasn't only weight, it was something else, something steadier. She leaned back, eyes closing, the hum of the engines filling the air. The war wasn't over, not for her. It never truly would be. But she had learned something in the dust, in the fire, in the moments when she thought she would break. Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply endures. And dignity, real dignity, doesn't need to speak at all. It just acts. The plane carried her forward, into a future she couldn't see yet. And in the silence that followed, her scars finally felt like more than wounds. They felt like proof.